All right, so here's what's going on with the case of U.S. versus Braden John Karony, the former CEO of SafeMoon. The guy's already been charged of three serious charges: securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. But even after the jury finds someone guilty, the work doesn't always end there. So now the government wants to take back some property they believe is connected to those crimes. And that's where these forfeiture proceedings come in. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. BTCC is a crypto exchange that's been around for 13 years, and there's no VPN or KYC needed to get started. You get access to over 300 different cryptocurrencies, and you get leverage up to 500x. Plus, there's bonuses such as the 10% deposit bonus when you use my referral link down in the description below. And you can get bonuses all the way up to $10,055. Now, if you want to research this more or if you're ready to get started, you can find that link again down in the description below. And shout out to Live4Afford sharing these documents over on Twitter. So the US government filed a request asking the court to include specific jury instructions for this part of the case. Basically, they want the jury to decide whether two specific amounts of money tied to two real estate transactions should be forfeited, that is, legally seized, because they were bought with money earned from the crimes. The instructions explain that if the jury already found Karony guilty, they must now decide whether the money in question is connected to those crimes. The government only has to prove this by a preponderance of the evidence. That just means it's more likely true than not, like if the scale tips even slightly towards yes. It's a much lower standard than beyond a reasonable doubt. They emphasize that the jury shouldn't revisit whether Karony is guilty. That part is done. This is all about the money and property now. The jury is told they should consider everything they've already seen in the trial, plus any new evidence, and just focus on one thing. Does this property come from dirty money or not? Now, what kinds of property are we talking about? The instructions make it clear that it can be any kind of asset: cash, bank accounts, real estate, or even business interests. And it doesn't matter if the government has already seized the property or not. If the jury decides it's tied to the crimes, the court can still rule that it gets forfeited. The two properties in question are $1,816,946.49, so a little over $1.8 million, from the sale of a property in Linden, Utah. The next one is $107,739 used to buy a property in North Salt Lake, Utah. The jury has to evaluate both amounts under each charge: securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. So that's 6 questions in total, 2 per charge. Now here's where it gets a bit more nuanced. In the updated verdict form, the jury isn't limited to saying just yes or no to the forfeiture. If they believe only part of the money came from illegal sources, they can now say, yeah, maybe only 50% of it should be forfeited, and they get a line to fill that in. This partial forfeiture idea came from a real case, U.S. versus sum of $185,336.07. The court in that case said you can't just treat all mixed money as criminal money. That's called the ink drop theory. Basically, the idea that one drop of illegal money taints the whole account. The court rejected that and said only the traceable portion can be seized. So back to Karony's case. The jury is reminded not to worry about who else might be affected. If Karony bought a house and his grandma, business partner, or bank has a piece of it, that's not the jury's problem. The court will handle third-party claims later. They're also told not to think about whether the forfeiture seems excessive or unfair. Maybe it seems like a lot of money to lose, but again, not their concern. That decision is reserved for the judge. And just like with the guilty verdict, their answers on the forfeiture questions must be unanimous. Every juror has to agree that the evidence shows the money came from the crimes. Now, let's talk about the verdict forms themselves. There were actually 2 versions. The first one was simpler. It asked the jury to answer yes or no to each of the 6 questions, 3 charges, 2 properties per charge. It didn't give them the option to say only part of the money was linked to the crime. Then they submitted a revised version, which was much more detailed and gave the jury more flexibility. This updated version allowed them to decide whether some percentage of the money, instead of all of it, was dirty. So if they thought only 30% of the 1.8 million was connected to fraud, they could write that down. Each page of the updated form includes those red text instructions about partial amounts and space where the jury can enter the percentage. And at the end, of course, there's a spot for the jury foreperson to sign and date the form once they've reached their verdict. So, in total, the jury's job here is to decide if each property is connected to each individual crime, do it using the more likely than not standard, make their decision unanimously, consider partial forfeiture if only part of the funds were illegal, ignore any concerns about fairness, impact on others, or whether the property has already been seized. The government, through the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York, is pushing to have all of this included in the court's final instructions to the jury. They put forward a strong legal basis, citing past cases like Fanazzo, Fruchter, Brown and Goldberg, and Capocia to support everything they're asking for. And that's where things stand. The jury now has to make the call, not about guilt, but about money. Did the fraud and laundering leave a paper trail to these 2 properties? If yes, and even partially yes, the government wants that money back. It's all about following the money and making sure crime doesn't pay. Let me know what you guys think about this. Share your thoughts with us down in the comments below. Again, you can find that link to BTCC in the description. Feel free to check that out or get started. And also, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm just 5 followers away from hitting 40. If you guys want to show your support and check it out, the link is in the description at Crypto Atlas. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters as well as my YouTube members. God bless you guys. We'll see you in the next episode.